Hello everyone. I'm actually going to do two videos about playing keyboards for That Joe Payne, as there's quite a lot to talk about and a lot going on. This first video is going to be more philosophical, but hopefully it's going to explain the reasons for the decisions I made when preparing for this gig. And the second video is going to be a much more traditional rig rundown, like the one I did for my Pink Floyd rig. I'm not sure if that's the right way round to go about that, but never mind, let's run with it. When I'm starting any new project, I always sit down before doing anything and try to work out what is going to be the most important aspect of what I have to do. The single thing that's going to govern all the decisions I have to make about putting together the rig, rehearsing, performing, the lot. Is it going to be like in Crazy Diamond, where the sound has to be exactly as the record and there's no compromise on any of the complexity, any of the sound design or anything? Or is it going to be more of a jam gig, where it's all very open-ended and I need lots of sounds at my fingertips to follow the mood of the gig? When I think of Joe's music, the first thing that jumps into my head is its sheer scale. The sound palette is very grand, and it's rather like Queen. There's lots of real emotion, but there's also that little bit of melodrama that you've got to get just right. There are some straightforward songs in the set, but for the most part, all the keyboard parts are incredibly detailed. There's some great voice leading, there's complex harmonies, shifting key centres, and I realised that the most important thing for me to do was to reproduce it with all the nuance that I could possibly muster. Partly to do justice to the amazing writing, but also to bring every part to life for whoever listens and watches the show. I wanted to make the audience feel as though there was a real orchestra on stage. Now, this is going to be no small order. It's very easy to make lifeless orchestral music when you're working with samples, as I would be. But as soon as I started out planning what I was going to do, I realised I had to answer a couple of questions. Firstly, how can I make the individual instruments and individual sections, the strings, the woodwinds, everything, sound as expressive and realistic as possible? And more importantly, how can I make those individual instruments and sections work together as a living orchestra does? To answer that first question, I need to decide where I'm going to actually get my samples from. And that decision is governed by how I'm going to play them. Given the size of the arrangements, I need to keep both hands on the keyboard pretty much all of the time. So I can't use the approach that you may have seen some film composers using, where you've got one hand on the keyboard and the other hand riding faders to shape the sound. And being able to change the sound of a note after you've played it is a very important part of recreating orchestral sounds like this. And as I've got both hands on the keyboard, this means that whatever samples and patches I use have to be able to respond to expression pedals or maybe breath controllers. I also need sounds that respond well to velocity, i.e. how hard you hit the notes. This is very important because it means that, again, with both hands on the keyboard, and this is very important because it means you can bring out one melodic line over another just by how hard you play and still control the overall volume with your pedals or whatever. Unfortunately, this rules out quite a few sample libraries as they're just not programmed to respond in that way, and that's fair enough, that makes sense. Violins and flutes and things just aren't pianistic instruments. Moving on to the samples themselves, I've got lots of big, detailed, multi-gigabyte orchestral samples in the computer back there, and unfortunately every one of them was let down by one or more points on that list of requirements. They're designed to be programmed rather than played, and I'm not nearly enough of a contact wizard to be able to make them work in the way I wanted to. Which leaves this old beast, my trusty Kurzweil. The orchestral samples in here are getting on a bit now, but the crucial difference is that they're designed to be played. They're designed specifically to be played on this particular keyboard, so they're very tuned in to its velocity response. They're nowhere near as detailed by any stretch of the imagination. I think the whole orchestral bank fits into maybe 16 megabytes, but that doesn't matter because it sounds dynamic enough when you play it, particularly when you've got the expression pedals, and if you're in a full band mix, they sound just as good as anything else. Answering the second question, how to make all these sounds and sections fit together naturally, that was far more complex. So a lot of the music I'm used to playing is very kind of cut and dried in terms of the arrangements. There'll be something like maybe a piano just in the verse, and then the chorus hits and you switch to sort of some big strings, maybe a synth or something, and then you just switch back to the piano, to the verse, and just switch between those. But here, the changes in the arrangements are very subtle, they're very organic, and they're happening all the time. So this setup just wouldn't work. I'd be hitting next patch, next patch, next patch every few bars. In a way, playing this kind of orchestral music is like playing one single huge instrument. It's not lots of separate instruments like you would have in a traditional arrangement. The whole orchestra works as one single instrument with this huge sound palette. This is something I learnt very, very early on when I was conducting, but of course this is now applying it to something completely new. Initially, I kind of put the problem to one side. It was a bit too complicated to think about and just got stuck into programming sounds because there was a lot of sounds I had to program. And it was while I was working on what was the opening song of the set, an Enid song called The One and the Many, that I had a revelation. You see, there's a very prominent church organ part in the song. And the Kurzweil has this really cool feature where there's a list of every conceivable stop in every conceivable footage, and you can just put them together, like you can when you're putting together a register on a real church organ. And it was while I was scrolling through this list of stops that I realised, of course, here was exactly an instrument that is designed so that the player can have control of a tonal palette that is just as big as an orchestra. So that was it. I scrapped all the setups I had been working on and put them together like I would in a church organ. So I would have this keyboard, and then I put another one on top, and then I've got my two manuals, and I have all these faders down here as the stops, which I can use just to fade in whichever part of the orchestra I need whenever. And this would be really simple to program and really simple to use, and above all it would be really expressive. So for example, if I've just got a regular string section here, then if there's a big important moment in the song, with one fader I can just bring it into sort of full divisi mode. And everything's in octaves and it's a really big sound, and then I can pull it back. And then I can crossfade the low strings into pizzicatos, so. And you get the idea. Now that I had my plan, in the next video I'll look in more detail at all the hardware that went into the rig and why I chose it.